welcome to Media MD, your fortnightly Doof Network dose of media that you have somehow missed. I'm Ruben Morehouse.
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
And this fortnight we are back to talk about cabin pressure. Cabin pressure was a prescription that came to us from a listener, Tim the Enchanter, who recommended this.
Not just a listener, a patron.
A patron, exactly. Thank you, Elliot. Who recommended this through our website, mediamdpodcast.com. So if you want to also recommend us stuff, go there. Now let's talk about cabin pressure.
Yeah.
Who has to do the plot summary? Like, I don't get it.
We should really think these things through before we get here.
I think that would go against the vibe of our show.
Yeah. But what if we just work off each other? Because that's kind of what ends up happening anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, so basically, it's a sitcom. The premise is that it's a small airline. So there's two pilots, a competent steward, and the owner, who is his mum.
Now let me stop you for a second. So Arthur is not a competent steward, I guess, is the point.
To be fair, wouldn't you love being served by Arthur? Like,
I
reckon
would make it more fun. You get the sense he would really spice up the in-flight demonstration, which is the worst part of flying.
Yeah, well, and it would probably be a pain in the ass at the time, but God, you're going to walk away with a story to tell, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, that's essentially
if you walk away, yeah.
This show is. Yes. So yeah, I mean, basically, all of the characters have flaws that prevent them from not being great at their jobs, but they kind of complement each other, and they're always running out of money, and so basically the premise is they take whatever jobs they can to try and keep this one plane airline afloat. Yeah,
it's a pretty good sitcom structure because it does give them an excuse to... It's kind of like Stargate, right? They could just be anywhere from episode to episode, and they could have any other characters to play off of.
It's a great workplace sitcom premise because, you do have a small group of people literally trapped together for extended periods of time that you get to work off of. As you've said, you can go anywhere and pick up anyone as a part of that for an episode or so. And as well as that, I think it is actually a good one for radio. And I think we'll talk about this a fair bit throughout this episode, but as a scripted radio show, which is something I have never listened to before, I think the plane stuff could have been kind of unnecessarily expensive to do on TV. And it would be very hard to find good varied angles of the cockpit and stuff. So I think that this was a smart decision for a radio sitcom.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, not to spoil anything, but there's a lot of plane malfunctions, which would be a lot of CGI, I guess, if it was a TV show. But yeah, you're right. It really excels in the format that it's in. I guess we should touch on the fact that this is a comedy, and I don't know how much we can say on this, but it is quite funny. So that's a check in that box. I mean, I guess it feels very British sort of from the get-go.
Yes, if you're someone who's watched some US sitcoms and some UK sitcoms, this is, sits very neatly in the UK sitcom category.
Yes.
I think...
It's so British. One of the characters, Douglas, is the driest British sense of humour that I've ever heard put to a character.
He's you're right, the epitome of that sort of dry, sarcastic, wordplay-based British humour. And I mean, so I guess, well, where did you get up to? I guess we should establish that for what spoilers we're going to be talking about today.
Yes, so there are 27 episodes, one for each letter of the alphabet. And
2 for Z.
Yes, and I got about halfway through. I almost finished season 2. I got up to the end of season 2, but not the Christmas special, which is again very British.
In fact, I listened to up until season 3, episode 1. So I listened to 2 more episodes than you did. And the Christmas special was part of that same BBC stuff they always do for things like Doctor Who and all the others where it's they're all for charity. So I didn't realize they did that for the radio, although as we established in the prescription, I didn't really realize they did scripted shows like this for the radio.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think that the thing that listening to the 2 seasons of it effectively really brought home to me was the humor of this show works so well because of the strength of these characters. And the fact that the show is written in a way that allows you to pick up more the more episodes you've listened to while still being enjoyable regardless of which episode you listen to is great. There's no real overarching arcs, but there are recurring things that come in that really make the more heart-warming or coldening moments land better, but also the comedy lands better because you know the characters better.
Yeah, I think the continuity is really well managed in that way. You're sort of rewarded with this sense because like when little details get brought back. So to bring up an example, we learn at the very end of season 1 that Doug, the seemingly overconfident co-pilot, actually has been lying to his wife and making out that he's the captain. And this starts to come back in season 2, where there are bits where Doug sort of where Martin pushes that he knows this about Doug.
Yes.
And it's funny because I think it's very well established. Like I could have brought someone into the episodes where this is talked about, and they probably would have picked up on what was happening instantly. And so like I feel there's no loss to someone who's coming into it. But as someone who's experienced the journey of Martin finding that out, you feel more connected to it. And
yes.
And I mean, that's obviously like I think what drives sitcoms, at least for me, is how connected I feel to the characters.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, these characters really do a lot to be consistent. I like the style of humor that they go for, which is very dry and also kind of like it's a lot based around expectations. Like I a lot of the time listening to Douglas's jokes play out, which are, he's a slow speaker and he speaks with gravitas, so it evolves kind of as you're thinking through it. You can kind of see the joke coming a little bit, but still, like, it lands in such a perfect way. There's a great example of this where it's in episode 2, and by episode 2 I was already fully in love with this show. There's a part of episode 2 where Douglas and Martin, who endlessly will play little games to amuse themselves. They've been playing a long-running game of Simon Says, and Martin keeps losing, and they keep starting again. And we get this bit where Carolyn comes in, Carolyn, the owner of the airline, comes in and says, "Oh, you guys still playing Simon Says? Douglas, stop that immediately." And Douglas says, "I'm afraid I can't do that. For 2 reasons." And it's a perfect joke because 1, he's just not going to do it, and 2, she didn't say Simon Says. And it like evolves in real time as you kind of also think of it. It's so perfect. It's a perfect joke.
Yeah, like I think, because I agree. I mean, there are obviously sitcoms out there, and I'm not naming any big bangs that sort of can often have many jokes that are so predictable that it's not funny because by the time it lands, you see it coming. But then there are others where, and this is one of them, where I can sort of see exactly the direction the joke is headed, especially when a character starts talking and you know that their sort of thing.
Yes.
And yet I still love it. Like, and I'm not quite sure what the underlying difference can be. Maybe it's just sort of how clever the setup is.
Yeah, I think the difference is, like, imagine if you're hanging out with a friend and they make a joke that you kind of set them up for, It's still a fun experience, just because it's like, yeah, that's a good joke, and I'm enjoying it, and I'm enjoying your reaction to the fact that you just made it. Like, hearing Douglas make a joke, and this is another testament to the acting, you can hear how smarmy he is about every joke that he makes, and that's what really sells it, is because it's not just the joke, it's the way that these characters bounce off of each other that makes it so enjoyable.
I mean, you're right. I think it is that I like the characters in this show. That's probably just what it is. Actually, so to talk about the acting, obviously, it's so fun. Benedict Cumberbatch, obviously these days, like I think he kind of got famous with Sherlock.
Yes, which
and then
was
obviously
around Sherlock season 1 came out around the time season 2 of this came out, I think. So this show really tracks his career kicking off in a big way.
But he so this was mostly sort of before he took off, but since taking off, I think 2 of the big things he's done are obviously Sherlock and Doctor Strange, and I think in both of those he plays, rather confident characters, and it was very fun to see him in this playing the exact opposite. Like Martin, the character he plays is, whatever the opposite of overconfident is.
He's not a loser, but he acts like he is.
I mean he's kind of the nerd, I guess, of the, like, he always has to follow the rules. He can't cope well under pressure. Like he's someone who kind of crumbles in the face of any adversity and has no confidence in himself. And obviously, like, that was such a stark contrast to some of the other bigger characters Benedict has played. That was quite fun to not see, but to listen to.
Yes. It's interesting because these characters are all, like, Again, I guess it's the acting and the writing. These characters could all be so annoying. Like, they're all archetypes which I have actively hated in other shows. But the characters are all just very likable, and they all, regardless of how much they seem to annoy each other, which is basically the premise of the show, is that these four characters annoy each other all the time. It's so clear that they actually have established quite a positive and healthy dynamic. In a lot of ways, not in all ways, I think.
Yeah, well, I think really like that's what a good sitcom does, is it creates a bunch of characters who kind of play off of each other in very conflict-inducing ways, but gives them some reason to stick together. And so, like, workplace sitcoms obviously work on the premise that these people have to work together. I think Cabin Pressure does the extra job of making it that the airline is so on the verge of bankruptcy all the time that they kind of have to, like, you know, team up to keep it alive.
Yeah, it does give it that, like, underdog vibe. And there's a few episodes where they all somehow band together to pull off weird schemes that manage to keep them in business.
Exactly. And I mean, I think you said that in other good sitcoms. You have things like Community, where they're all stuck in the college together. Always Sunny, I guess they're stuck together by unhealthy relationships, which is why that show's kind of, you know, the sitcom squared. But, like, I agree. I think this show uses a lot of... definitely at the start, the characters all sort of fit into tropes, I guess, is the word I'd use. And it's... They start to become more three-dimensional as we spend more time with them. And I think that's why there were some jokes in the first season where they didn't quite work for me, because it was like, oh, of course, well, you know, Arthur is the bumbling idiot.
Yeah.
Of course, he does this. Like, okay. And I found less and less of those in season 2. I don't know if it's because the writing got better or if because I just got more invested in Arthur. But like either way, I think you're right. The like one sentence summary of each of these characters fits very neatly into stereotypes we've seen in a lot of other shows, and yet they're done very solidly here. So like it barely ever bothered.
Yeah, you're right. And I don't think it is because the writing got better. I think it just is. Characters like this, they need to grow on you a bit. Like, otherwise you do just find Douglas's, you know, incessant sarcasm draining and Arthur's stupidity tiring, right? But you just kind of start to get them, and you start to get the sense of their three-dimensionality, I guess. Maybe less so with Arthur, who sometimes does feel a bit two-dimensional, but does have his moments. But more so even with Douglas and the others, Douglas is a character who is so sarcastic, almost to the point of cruelty, but not quite there.
I don't know, he's pretty cruel a lot of the time.
Yeah, maybe. But in that way of like, and maybe this is a bit of an Australian thing as well, in that way of like, he does it because he's just terrible at showing affection, and the only thing he can do to interact with another man is endlessly wheedle at them.
Yeah, I think like framing a lot of what he does is just taking the piss.
Yes.
In what he perceives to be a kind of friendly way. Would be fair. I mean, he also obviously thinks he's far and away the best person on the plane.
But he kind of is.
I mean, that's the great thing about his character, is that he's correct. He so for those who haven't listened to the show, which you should go and do, he was an actual airline pilot for like 30 years or something, right? Like a long time.
Yes.
And then he got fired for reasons that haven't been explained, where I'm up to at least. And is now the co-pilot for this shitty airline, and obviously he's not very happy about that.
Yes, especially because the pilot that he is a co-pilot to, Martin, is incredibly green, and also has kind of neuroses that mean that sometimes he just isn't a good pilot.
Yeah, I think I loved the way Caroline, who's the owner of the airline, sums them up in, I forget exactly what episode it was. It's the one where they go to like the training school to get the airline certified.
I just listened to this one. It's I have a good pilot and a safe pilot, and the safe pilot makes sure the good pilot doesn't do anything too crazy.
Yeah. I'm like, because you'd already picked up by that point in the show that was their dynamic, and I just love how concisely it was expressed in the story in that episode. I thought that was really well done.
Yeah, they really do balance out each other quite well, in the sense that Douglas really does just have a lot of really good but crazy ideas, and Martin is kind of smart and knows the technicals enough to say, no, that idea is too crazy.
Yeah, well, it's sort of like the safe pilot keeps the good pilot in check, and the good pilot will save the safe pilot if something goes wrong. Is sort of how she summarizes it.
Yeah.
It's just that is just their dynamic to a T. I loved that like almost throwaway line towards the end of the episode that I was just like, God, that is spot on.
Yeah. Write that one down for the show later. Well, let's talk about Arthur and Caroline, shall we?
Yeah.
So Caroline is the owner of MJN Air, this single airplane charter service.
No, I love that. MJN stands for My Jet now because she got the jet from her ex-husband, who was apparently very wealthy.
Yes. And Arthur is her son, who is there. He acts as the steward, but he doesn't really need to. He's just there because you get the sense that Caroline doesn't really know what else to do with him.
yeah, pretty much. And he just loves it. I mean, that I think the reason you get on board with Arthur's constant stupidity is because of the positive spin on it. Like he's kind of
so
charmingly,
eager.
he's charmingly eager in his stupidity, and that's just kind of endearing. And why he grows on you. I think despite being the only character where I'm up to who hasn't really evolved as much depth as any of the others.
Yes, and I kind of feel the same way. He hasn't got that much depth, but it's kind of like, and maybe there is more depth to him, maybe not. You kind of get hints at it, I think. There are times when he never is smart, because he's consistently, who he is. But there are times where he kind of has these moments of like there's this moment that seems kind of innocuous now, but a moment where they have a week on standby, there are no flights, and he asks to borrow the keys to Carolyn's car because he just wants to go for a nice drive. And it's just such a human motivation of like, yeah, I've got some time, I just want to do something that will be nice and relaxing. And it's not a smart, it's not an intellectual thing to do, but it's just a kind of fleshes him out a little bit more.
Yeah, I also think he has those sorts of Carl Pilkington moments where he says sort of he'll make a comment that's so benign or obvious or something, but it's something that nobody else had really focused on or pointed out. So that's sort of that idiot genius thing he kind of has going sometimes.
Yes. And maybe there's one other one that I should call out, which is early in season 2, I think, where Arthur and Martin are paired up together, which is not a pairing that you see that much. And their plot is they're going off to get an engineer to fix something back on the airplane. And Martin keeps doubting that they run into trouble along the way, of course. And Martin is like, oh, well, we better turn back. We can't fix this. Without Douglas, we can't solve any problems. And Arthur is just kind of endlessly encouraging of him and helps him realize, no, you are a smart person. You can actually come up with your own solutions, which happens. And it's this great moment of yeah, man, Arthur's just he's stupid, but he's just so friendly that you just can't help but love him.
Yeah. I mean, that episode also, I think, has this interesting reveal of, how, Martin can do a lot better when he doesn't have Doug kind of always bringing him down. I mean, I find Martin a very painful character to watch / listen to just because, I don't know. I hate those characters, or I don't hate them, but I find it very difficult to watch those characters who are getting in their own way.
Yes, he is self-destructive, isn't he?
And it's just I mean, just that's the trope, and that means they're doing it well. When I'm like, oh god, no, Martin. But I was just sometimes like, oh, I can't do this. It hurts so much to watch him do this.
Yeah.
Which means it's working. Yeah, so I guess, I don't know, we kind of skipped over Carolyn, so to quickly do her, she starts off as kind of the cheapskate, bossy...
Starts off? What do you mean?
Well, I mean, sorry, starts off just as the cheapskate,
there we go.
Sort of, bossy, I don't know, tight-ass boss who is just trying to, constantly make their lives miserable, and then sort of the more we learn about her and what else is going on, the more sympathetic you go to how she is, but then also she is still kind of an ass. So, kind of like Douglas in a way.
Yes, but the thing that changes the spin on it is it becomes very clear quite early on in season 1, I think, or midway through it, that she's not doing this because she's greedy or wants to save a lot of money. It's because genuinely they're all kind of not very good at their job, and she likes this little collection that she's built of people that she can work with and wants it to, if not succeed, at least still exist. And the only way for that to happen is to be penny pinching, because they're just not they don't earn much money.
No, they're constantly on the verge of bankruptcy.
Yes.
And yeah, exactly. So like it's kind of like her all of her annoying facets come from a good place basically, and that's why you start to credit her. And obviously I think she plays off Arthur quite well. Like there's a lot of good lines with her just kind of ribbing on him for being an idiot.
Yes.
Yeah, like I know I liked their dynamic of the acerbic mum and the 29-year-old son who still lives at home that she can't get rid of basically.
Yeah. They just all play off each other so well. I think Douglas also plays off of Carolyn really well. They're kind of like partners in crime, but also rivals in a very interesting way.
Yeah.
It's a really strong core cast. It's a really and it's a great setup for a lot of hilarity. I think it's the writer, whose name is John Finnemore, who also plays Arthur. Really did do a great job setting up a really strong premise that you can tell just has legs because of the endless amount of stories that they could do with these four characters and still get a lot of humor out of it.
Yeah, but of course, because it's British, they set themselves up with this silly alphabet challenge, sort of right from the get-go, that finishes after 27 episodes, which is just like, I'm so glad that they went, because from a quick read, like the Z episodes were sort of an after tour thing, and I'm very glad they got to finish it off, but it's just such a British idea to me that they set out with this goal of like, well, we can't do more than 26 episodes, and like it just, rather than running it into the ground. But I think we should talk about the radio-ness of it, because obviously, we've said this a few times. Like, this was a completely new experience for me, listening to scripted radio. And like, I don't know, there were some bits where I was kind of like, okay, like I can see how this was network radio, with the studio audience. I found that was very odd.
There's a studio audience here that's like laughing and cheering along, and it was very strange.
I mean, they're clearly
I'm imagining
they're clearly edited in.
Yeah,
like, I don't know. That's the whole thing for me. Is like they've gone out of their way to edit this in, and obviously something like that affects the pacing of everything. And like I wonder what the exact decision was there. I think maybe it was to slow things down, basically. But it's I do tend to associate studio audience laughter in a sitcom with the sitcom not being as good. So, like, I found that a little grating at first.
I think that's a very American instinct, because there are shows like the IT Crowd has a laugh track. Like, I feel like a lot of British shows just did that back in the day, and it was just like the thing that you did. I don't know. I agree with you though. I still have that instinctive reaction of like, you don't need to tell me when to laugh, man.
Yeah, I mean, like something that like part of the reason it works, and maybe I'm just a bit of an idiot, but with a lot of these very sharp, sarcastic, humory things or wordplay ones, it can take you a second to figure out exactly what happened. The laugh track, gives me a bit of time to catch up. So it depends on the show. Like, I think, I think I've already brought this up. Like, you've got something like Community, where I think it wasn't until like the second time I was watching some episodes that jokes would land on me, because like it was like the second time I was watching it that I actually had time to process some of the jokes.
Yeah.
And obviously, I think having a studio audience makes that less necessary, because everything basically pauses for a few seconds for you to catch up and laugh along with it.
Yeah, it does work quite well. You're right. Maybe that is the reason.
I mean, yeah, but it did take me a few episodes to get used to it. And especially because I think it's just grating when there is a joke that you don't think is that funny, which happened to me a bit in season 1, and then the whole show stops for a few seconds for an imaginary audience to laugh. It's a bit like, oh, come on. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being silly.
Yeah, maybe.
But yeah, like, so specifically to go into the radio stuff, like we've already talked about some of this, but like I think the airplane setup is good for avoiding having to take a lot of awkward shots. Like, it would be hard to do a lot of shots on a plane, particularly in the cockpit. Like, cockpits would be a nightmare for filming, I reckon. And like, I think the show takes a lot of advantage of the fact that it's on radio to do, I don't know if there's a technical term for it, but like kind of visual gags that make you imagine what the visual gag is.
Yeah, I think this is a common thing of like a book being adapted to a movie or a TV show, right? Is you get these moments where things just don't look like things don't look as good as you can imagine them. And so doing a radio comedy like this lets you let the audience imagine the horrifyingness of whatever thing that is being described, right? And there's an example from the first episode where, and actually this happens a few times, where Arthur cooks some food for the pilots, and it's always described as being horrifying. And in the first episode in particular, it's described as a recipe Arthur calls his orange platter. Just a bunch of orange stuff. And it's described so that you get to imagine the horrifying, sickly orange of the plate of food being served to you. And of course, the joke just wouldn't work as well if it was, you could see the orange, because it wouldn't look that bad, like, obviously, but it just works so well on radio.
Yeah, or it would have to be so well sort of set up, like,
yes.
it would be a prop that would have to have a lot of time put into it. Yeah, I agree. There's one that I've just realized is from the season 3 episode 1, so I can't really talk about it, but there's a great one with a lemon in a similar thing. But
why not?
Yeah, like I agree. It's the way they sort of give you enough information to prompt your imagination, but they don't like over explain it to you. You're just left to kind of make it horrifying in its own way. And trust in your ability to horrify yourself.
Yeah. I really liked it. I wonder, this is obviously the first radio comedy I've really gotten into, so I don't know, my expectations now with it, all radio comedies are just really good like this. Maybe that's just not true.
Yeah, it's a very good question. I wonder what else is out there. I have no idea. Yeah.
I guess the final question to ask about this show is, how does it compare to what I think we all would say is the obvious comparison to this show, or at least for series 2 of Cabin Pressure, Supernatural. What do you think, Elliot? Does it stack up?
I'm just going to explain this because everyone's going to need context. I was like, when Ruben went to Google for the Cabin Pressure picture to use for our image, like for this episode, one of the first hits was a thingy that's just the Cabin Pressure icon next to the show Supernatural with the word versus between them.
Yeah, it's very inexplicable. I don't know who is pitting these two shows against each other.
Comparing Cabin Pressure to Supernatural? They share almost zero
Or is it
facets.
like a fight? Like, who would win between the 4 characters from Cabin Pressure and Sam and Dean Winchester?
It'd definitely be Cabin Pressure.
They do have an airplane.
Yeah. Anyway, that was very weird. So that's just a little behind the scenes insight for everyone, I guess.
Yeah, we'll post this image on the Twitter. I'm going to tweet it right now.
Okay. Yeah, so when you saw this tweet a few days ago and you're wondering what the fuck Ruben was on about, now you know now that you're listening to this.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess that's pretty much Cabin Pressure, so I'm just going to keep stalling for time with this sentence while Ruben tweets that. And
it's going to take ages. Don't worry, we'll cut this bit, but I will tweet it.
Yeah, okay. Well, so unless there's anything else to say, should we just dive into giving it a number?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know if I have, like, we've kind of talked about it. It's the kind of thing where, realistically, I just wouldn't have ever found out about it. And if someone had described it to me and not actively forced me to listen to it, I probably wouldn't have. And so knowing that, I'm going to say, people go and listen to this. It's pretty good. You'll like it.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, this is sort of what Media MD was for, and it's happening to both of us at once, which rarely happens. But this is something neither of us had heard of, probably would never found on our own, and it ended up being really good. And I'm really glad that I listened to a bit of it. So
yeah,
go check it out. We sort of talked about where it's available. Last episode, there's audiobooks and all sorts of places you can get it. So go check it out. And so, Ruben, if you were to give a number out of 10 to how you felt about this show,
I think it's an 8. It's an 8. I really did laugh out loud a few times per episode at least, which is pretty good.
Man, I shouldn't have let you go first because I was going to say 8, and now I feel like I'm just copying you. And like,
copycat.
If I feel like that, then everyone else must feel like I'm doing that.
I know I do.
So yeah, okay, 8's all round. Individually, we all said 8s.
Without collaboration. We wrote it down beforehand, so you can be sure.
Yeah, I tweeted it out before. Yeah, okay. Well, so that's That's Cabin Pressure.
Yeah.
And I guess now it's time to dive into what we'll be doing for the next 2 weeks.
Yes. So what is it?
Well, as is tradition, I am bringing the Christmas recommendation for the year.
I don't have a bell to jingle.
I don't think I've deserved a bell so far.
Does that sound like a bell?
It sounds like a coin on glass.
It's close enough.
Yeah. Anyway, so 4th time's the charm, Christmas recommendations.
Yeah, I'm so ready.
Hopefully. I am bringing the Christmas movie The Night Before.
The Night Before what, though? Am I right?
It's Christmas, Rube.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so this is a movie. It's about 3 friends played by Seth Rogen, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and Anthony Mackie.
Oh, cool.
And the presence of Seth Rogen kind of tells you what sort of movie this is.
It's one of them kinds of movies.
Yeah, it's a stoner comedy. I think it's a very solid stoner comedy. It's Christmas themed, so I enjoy. I actually watched it with my family last year for Christmas. That's why I've sort of had this one penciled down for so long, because my family just impromptu decided to watch it last year, and we actually all had a ball.
When did this movie come out? Is it like a recent movie?
It's from 2015, so,
okay.
Fairly recent.
So why did you... Hold on. There's more explanation needed here. You and your family were together for Christmas, of course, and you were like, hey, what should we do? Should we open presents? Should we drink some eggnog? Wait. I heard about this movie 2 years ago, this Seth Rogen stoner comedy. Why don't we watch that?
No, it was like... It could have been like a couple of days before or after Christmas, I don't know. It was just everyone was there for almost a week. And my sister is wont to just put on Netflix, pick a random movie and go for it. And I think Netflix recommended this one to us.
All right.
That was pretty much. I mean, that's how a lot of movies get discovered in the deep old household these days. Is my
through
sister,
the algorithm.
My sister just putting on something from Netflix. It's a very hit and miss system. Not gonna lie.
I can
imagine. In this case, I think it was a bit of a hit. Like I'd actually seen the movie before. I think when it came out. But I enjoyed it just as much the second time. I think it's a really solid Christmas movie, solid stoner comedy. Great cast, obviously. There's a few surprise appearances that I don't want to spoil for you, so don't go and look up the cast list before you dive in.
Okay.
Just sort of enjoy them when they show up.
Is it Benedict Cumberbatch?
No, unfortunately not. Unless I'm forgetting something. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's a nice Christmas story. I mean, obviously, those of you who are Doof patrons and follow our bonus content will know we've been thinking a lot about Christmas stories recently. I think this is a good Christmas story. I think it's funny, and I think it'll be a bit of a hit.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Well, I guess we'll be back on Christmas to talk about it more.
I think we're actually back on Boxing Day, but same
nobody knows what that is if you're not from Australia. So we can just call it Christmas. What's the one that comes after Eve?
Anti-Eve.
Yeah. Christmas Bad Eve, we call it. Cool. Yeah, well, I'll check it out, and we'll be back on Christmas Bad Eve to talk about it more.
I can't wait. And if you can't wait either, you can follow us on Twitter at MediaMD Podcast. It's honestly, I'm not going to lie to you, that Twitter feed is mostly deep in pack stuff these days, but there's MediaMD stuff there too. So you should check it out. I've tweeted that awesome Cabin Pressure Series 2 versus Supernatural meme. All right, yeah,
it's the hot new meme. Yeah, if you like seeing random unexplained memes that don't make sense until you get the context 3 to 4 days later, that Twitter feed is the place for you.
Yes, you can also leave us a review on iTunes, or as we mentioned, thanks to Tim the Enchanter, our patron/listener, for recommending this topic. And if you have something you want us to read, watch, listen, head on over to our website. You can leave a voicemail or you can email us and let us know what you think might be good. This is something new we're trying, I guess, which is, patron/listener supported recommendations. Yeah, again, that website is mediamdpodcast.com. If you're interested to find out more about the other great shows that are on the Doof Media Network, the place to go is doofmedia.com or to patreon.com/doofmedia. If you don't even want to find out, you just want to throw money at them. There's a lot of great shows on the Doof Media Network, and they only exist because of our lovely patrons. Great shows like... Well, Do the Right Thing is one. It's a creative writing podcast, so everyone gets together and creative writes on the same prompt, and then we'll talk about the stories. it's a lot of fun. They're actually doing a contest now. So speaking of the patrons, thanks to the support of our patrons, Do the Right Thing's offering a cash prize for people who go back on stories that they've written over the last few months for Do the Right Thing and edit them, and then the patrons will get to vote on which story they think is the best, which I think is going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait to see what cleaned up submissions get submitted.
Yes. Other great shows on the Duff Media Network include Deep Impact, of course, but also What You Say. We've got Ward, the Duffcast. Actually, the Duffcast, we were just on an episode of the Duffcast, I think.
We are on the Duffcast tomorrow.
Yes.
Actually. So we're recording both this and the other one, like a bit out of sync with when we normally record them. So we're a bit of a mess in terms of predicting that stuff. But I think this episode comes out the day before us being on the Legend of Korra Duffcast episode.
Oh, that was such a fun recording. I'm so excited to talk more about Legend of Korra. So definitely check that out tomorrow.
Yes. God, I hope so, because we've said it like 4 times now. So.
The place to check all those shows out is duffmedia.com. You can also find links to all the other things we talked about, as well as all of the clues for the Media MD ARG. You can help us figure out just who is Dr. MD and why are his pilots so underpaid. Elliot, why don't you tell the listeners this fortnight's clue?
Barcode.
And we'll see you next fortnight.